Hello and welcome to today's webinar on marine sanctuaries as an ocean conservation tool. I'm Kevin Haskell with New Jersey's Department of Environmental Protection's Coastal Management Program and serve on the Mid-Atlantic Regional Council on the Oceans Management Board and the Mid-Atlantic Committee on the Ocean Steering Committee. I'll be facilitating today's webinar for you. Some light logistics get out of the way first, though I'm sure at this point you're all fairly accustomed to these platforms. First up, the webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our website later. By default, as everyone joins, they'll be muted, but feel free to have your webcams on if you'd like. We'll be utilizing the chat function today for questions, so please enter them there, and when we have time at the end for our speakers to actually answer them. We're also including a survey link if you'd like to share some information about yourselves. Look for that link in the chat as well. Finally, Zoom gives you some options for control how you see people in the meeting. So up on the top right, there's a view button where you can change how people will show up on your screen if you want to change the way that looks as we're going through the webinar. With that out of the way, Marco and by extension Mako have long had an interest in marine habitats and healthy ocean ecosystems, going back to our founding in 2009. At last year's Mid-Atlantic Ocean Forum, we covered a lot of ocean, looking across sustainable ocean ecosystems by looking at how we are connecting science, connecting people, and ultimately connecting conservation products with outcomes. We delved into setting up an ocean conservation work group, which I'm happy to report is up and running. The effort is currently led by Laura McKay of Virginia and myself as co-leads, with some great support across our Mako partners in our other states, our federal family at NOAA and BOEM, the Mid-Atlantic Fisheries Management Council, always our portal team, and our friends at the Wildlife Conservation Society. So consider this a formal plug. This working group is open to all those who are interested in coordinating and collaborating on ocean conservation issues in the Mid-Atlantic. Everyone's welcome to join, so please reach out to us. Either you can put your name in the chat, we can follow up with you, or if you already have our contacts, please feel free to just reach out directly to us. We'd gladly have you working with us. We're currently developing a work plan for 2023 through this conservation work group, and so look for that soon on our website too. Excuse me. So the Mid-Atlantic is home to some amazing ocean ecosystems, and clearly there's a great deal of interest in ocean conservation issues and in all the various forms that can take. As you're likely aware, NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries is in the early stages of the process to designate a new national marine sanctuary off the coast of New York, New Jersey in the Hudson Canyon area. So we felt it would be a great opportunity to look at how this process has worked in other places. So today we're going to learn about the designation of the Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary and the innovative approaches for accommodating various uses, including fishing, for the primary purpose of protecting natural and cultural resources. We'll then hear how the Mid-Atlantic Ocean Data Portal can be used to visualize use of the ocean and coastal space. So without further ado, and keeping with us changing a letter and a name to see how close you're paying attention to us, I'd like to introduce Ben Haskell. Ben has spent the last 30 years protecting special ocean places. He is currently the Deputy Superintendent of Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary, where he has been for the last 23 years. He wears many hats in this role, such as the Maritime Heritage and Resource Protection Coordinator, the Management Planning Lead, and Fisheries Policy Liaison. Prior to working at Stellwagen, Ben spent 5 years as Science Coordinator for the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary, where he was instrumental in helping establish the Tortugas Ecological Reserve. Ben, take it away.
Thanks, Kevin. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect.
Excellent. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for the introduction, Kevin, and thanks very much to Marco for this invitation to present to you today. As you consider the designation of Hudson Canyon as a National Marine Sanctuary, I would like to share with you some lessons learned from Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary. Next slide, please, Judy. Can you go to the next slide, please, Judy?
Looks like it's stuck. It's not in presenter mode yet. I don't know what's. hopefully that'll get sorted quickly. Everything always works so smoothly when we test it out right before the meeting. So, hold on a second and we'll get those up and loaded again. Looks like we have the slides. Hopefully they'll start moving too. So.
Great. Perfect, Judy. Thank you. So my presentation today will start by explaining what Stellwagen Bank Sanctuary is not, and then I'll segue to explain what it is and why it's a special area of national significance. I'll give examples of how we achieve protection using 4 case studies. And then I'll conclude with some takeaway messages and thoughts on why Hudson Canyon should be designated a national marine sanctuary. Next slide, please. Back in 1991, at the Gloucester public hearing on designation of the Stellwagen Bank Sanctuary, Angela Sanfilippo, who now runs Gloucester Fishermen's Wives Association, provided public comment. Here's a quote from her comments. "I don't want to wake up and find out that on Stellwagen Bank, there's been a permit given for sand and gravel mine, Google's Island, which is a proposed floating casino, fish farm, oil drilling, ocean dumping, and the list goes on." Next slide, please. Well, Angela will be relieved to know, and she does know, that as a result of the designation of the sanctuary in 1992, there is no sand and gravel mining, offshore gambling casino anchored to the top of the bank, and that was actually a proposal prior to designation, wind turbines or fish farms, oil and gas development, or ocean dumping. Other prohibitions include the removal or damage of historic or cultural resources and the taking of marine reptiles, mammals, and seabirds. You will notice that 2 of these prohibitions include important exceptions for impacts by traditional fishing activities. You will also notice that traditional fishing is not prohibited. In fact, recreational fishing is allowed throughout the sanctuary, and commercial fishing is allowed in all but 22% of it. This was a concession made by Congress in recognition of the importance of fishing to the regional economy and the fact that fishing has been an integral aspect of the ecosystem for the past 400 years. Next slide, please. Needless to say, without being designated a national marine sanctuary, Stellwagen Bank would likely be an industrial zone by now, or certainly in the near future with the advent of wind energy development. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Every sanctuary has a designation document which serves as its charter, and the regulations for each sanctuary derive from its charter. In other words, if an activity is not listed as subject to regulation in the charter, it cannot be regulated. For example, traditional fishing is not an activity listed as subject to regulation. Changing the designation document requires approval from Congress. Next slide, please. As a brief overview, the National Marine Sanctuary Program was founded in 1972 when the National Marine Sanctuaries Act was passed into law. 20 years later, Stellwagen Bank was designated as a National Marine Sanctuary as part of the Oceans Act of 1992. As you can see from the map on the right, Stellwagen Bank is essentially an underwater extension of Cape Cod. The sanctuary boundaries encompass 638 square nautical miles of federal waters and abuts the 3-mile state boundary to the north and the south. The western boundary was drawn to avoid the Massachusetts Bay disposal site, and the eastern boundary is somewhat arbitrarily drawn. National Marine Sanctuaries are inherently multiple use spaces because this is what the Congress envisioned when they created the system 50 years ago. The Act has several policies and purposes, but I want to highlight one in particular, which is that Congress directed us to facilitate public and private uses that are compatible with the primary objective of resource protection. And they chose not to implement any outright prohibitions in the National Marine Sanctuaries Act other than the destruction of sanctuary resources not otherwise allowed. Consequently, National Marine Sanctuaries are not sanctuaries at all in the traditional sense of the word, but are actually multiple use areas where all activities are allowed unless otherwise prohibited. Each sanctuary implements site-specific regulations, which include prohibitions, and some sanctuaries have established restrictive zones to protect sensitive resources and/or separate conflicting uses. Next slide, please. This is our trusty steed, the 50-foot research vessel, Auk. She has faithfully transported many scientists out to the sanctuary and sometimes beyond to conduct a variety of missions over the past 17 years. Next slide, please. There are currently 15 national marine sanctuaries in the system, plus 2 marine national monuments, Papahanaumaua in Hawaii and Rose Atoll in American Samoa. These are all places in the ocean or Great Lakes of special national significance. Sanctuaries can be designated by Congress, such as Stellwagen Bank, or administratively by NOAA, such as Hudson Canyon. Next slide, please. Overseeing the sanctuary system is the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries, a program office within the National Ocean Service. And NOAA itself is a bureau in the Department of Commerce. While it's important to note that the National Ocean Service and the National Marine Fisheries Service are different parts of NOAA, we work closely together on important marine conservation issues. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what makes Stellwagen Bank Sanctuary a place of special national significance? Located along the western edge of the Gulf of Maine, water circulation in the sanctuary is heavily influenced by the southerly flowing Maine coastal current. This current, in combination with twice daily tidal fluctuations, creates upwelling that brings nutrients up from the bottom. Next slide, please. This creates a highly productive area that supports well over 575 species of invertebrates, fish, seabirds, and marine mammals, ranging in size from the minute bacterian plankton to the largest mammal on Earth. The presence of whales year-round is one reason the sanctuary is nationally significant. The charismatic humpback whale attracts well over 600,000 whale watchers per year and makes us one of the top 10 places in the world to go whale watching. Next slide, please. The sanctuary is also nationally significant because it's a rich repository of historic resources, specifically shipwrecks. An important part of our mission is to inventory, document, and protect the historic and cultural resources of the sanctuary. Historical records indicate that there are more than 200 historic shipwrecks within the sanctuary. 47 of those have been discovered and documented by sanctuary staff or research partners. And 7 of these shipwrecks have been listed on the National Register of Historic Places, including the ones shown here. Next slide. The sanctuary is the busiest corner of the Gulf of Maine. What you're seeing here is a day in the life of the sanctuary, in this case, July 16, 2009, with various types of vessels either heading into the sanctuary to conduct their business or simply transiting through. Much of this activity is driven by the ecosystem services that the sanctuary provides, primarily the provision of food for humans and food for other animals. Next slide, please. The numbers on this slide come from economic studies that were conducted to support the management plan. As you can see, a significant amount of economic activity occurs within the sanctuary. All this activity is part of what's known as the blue economy, which seeks to balance economic and environmental health to support sustainable development. Next slide, please. I'm going to present 4 case studies that are meant to give you a sense for what we do and how we do it. The first case study is about protecting seafloor habitat. In the map on the right, the orange polygon is a zone overlapping 22% of the sanctuary and is closed to bottom tending commercial fishing gear. The Stellwagen Dedicated Habitat Research Area was established by the New England Fishery Council and promulgated by NIMS 4 years ago. It is part of the Western Gulf of Maine Habitat Closed Area and has been protected since 1998. Consequently, it serves as our de facto reference area. What's notable about this zone is that the sanctuary did not create it. However, we work closely with our partners, the New England Fishery Council and NIMS, to study and enforce it. Next slide, please. We just completed a 3-year study. Another very important habitat in the sanctuary is sand. What you're seeing here is a video of sand lance, which is, from our perspective, the most important fish in the sea. Sand lance are able to dart in and out of the sand to escape predation. Sand lance are responsible for much of the economic activity I mentioned earlier, because most of the charismatic megafauna, whales, tuna, groundfish, seabirds, rely on sand lance as a rich food source. Next slide, please. We just completed a 3-year study for BOEM on the importance of sand habitat using Stellwagen Bank as a model sandy bank, because they are looking to mine sand offshore in order to replenish beaches along the coast. What we found out is that sand is a highly productive habitat and critically important for the sand lance. We also discovered that sand lance settled to the seafloor as larvae at the same time that the sea scallop dredge fishery starts up in April. Therefore, we've asked the New England Fishery Council to consider shifting the season a bit later to give the sand lance a chance to settle and develop. Next slide. The second case study is about reducing the risk to right whales from ship strike. We worked with whale researchers and naturalists to compile density maps for baleen whales. We then petitioned an international maritime organization to shift the traffic separation scheme to Boston, to an area with lower density. Seafloor in that area is also composed of sediments not favorable to sand lance and therefore not favorable to foraging whales. The change went into effect in July 2007, and since then, whale strikes in the region from large ships have decreased significantly. Next slide, please. Most recently, the U.S. Coast Guard just completed their port access routing study for New England with proposed measures, and they accepted our recommendation to consider actions to minimize ship strikes on whales and reduce underwater radiated noise by maintaining the Boston traffic separation scheme, along with recommending additional fairways for tug and barge traffic heading north and south, in addition to tanker traffic heading to and from the Bay of Fundy. Next slide. The third case study is about incentivizing compliance with right whale slow speed zones. The Corporate Responsibility Program is the brainchild of our science coordinator, Dr. David Wiley, and has been going on since 2012 in partnership with the International Fund for Animal Welfare. Our GIS guru, Mike Thompson, shown here, analyzes AIS data to determine compliance by every ship over 65 feet that transits through the two seasonal management areas or slow speed zones that overlap the sanctuary. This year, 305 report cards were sent out to 206 companies around the world. This corporate responsibility program has resulted in the highest compliance for seasonal management areas in the nation, with more than 70% of companies receiving A+ or A grades in their certificates. Next slide, please. The last case study addresses the pressures of industrial development. If there's one thing the Stellwagen Bank Sanctuary has achieved in its 30-year history, it is preventing industrial development, whether that be the mining of sand or the installation of wind turbines. Thankfully, BOEM has declared the sanctuary and a few other areas in the Gulf of Maine incompatible with wind energy development, specifically the installation of wind turbines. However, the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries does not consider wind energy development necessarily incompatible with sanctuaries. And on the West Coast, particularly California, it will be difficult to avoid developing some portion of the existing or planned sanctuaries for wind energy. Next slide, please. In the case of Stellwagen Bank Sanctuary, we support the transition to clean energy and recognize that the power generated by offshore floating turbines has to make it to land somewhere, and this probably means getting routed through the sanctuary. In anticipation of this eventuality, we have created a wind energy subcommittee of our Sanctuary Advisory Council to advise us on creating one or two cable corridors through the sanctuary and on whether a buffer is needed around the sanctuary to minimize impacts on sanctuary resources, primarily noise impacts on cetaceans. Next slide, please. That concludes the case studies. I want to finish by mentioning that all these activities I've discussed and everything else we do is guided by our management plan, which we revised and will soon be published. Its planning horizon is the next 5 to 10 years and serves to inform the public and the sanctuary constituents on management activities. Action plans are how NOAA addresses management issues and challenges. Each action plan, and there are 15 in this new plan, has goals and strategies to address those goals. Next slide, please. I want to leave you with several takeaway messages that encapsulate our philosophy toward the management and the protection of sanctuary resources. First, despite the fact that we have not changed our regulations since they were first promulgated in 1993, we have managed to find ways to protect sanctuary resources either by working with our partners to achieve better protection or by using non-regulatory means to influence human behavior. Second, we try to give users of the sanctuary the information they need to make informed decisions because most of them realize that the sanctuary ecosystem provides them services that they need to thrive. Similarly, we try to incentivize users to do the right thing, either through peer pressure or positive reinforcement. Fourth, protecting ecosystem services helps drive the blue economy. And five, sanctuaries should serve as reference areas, whether it be for wind energy impacts or fishing impacts, and inform management of the surrounding waters. Without reference areas, how can we really know what impact we are having on habitat or species or ecosystem services? Next slide, please. Or the one before, yeah, thank you. In conclusion, these are the reasons why I recommend that you consider a national sanctuary to protect the nationally significant ecosystem of Hudson Canyon. First, achieve comprehensive protection of the ecosystem by utilizing the authorities of the National Marine Sanctuaries Act. For example, to protect species and habitats that aren't otherwise protected. Second, raise public awareness about this amazing ecosystem. And one way to do that is by building a public constituency, such as through the Sanctuary Advisory Council, that can advocate for protection. Fourth, conduct long-term monitoring and directed research. Fifth, coordinate enforcement assets for focused protection. And lastly, create a sense of place in the public psyche. The ocean is a vast area, and as climate change impacts it and the rest of the planet, the public needs a place to relate to and care about. If we care about a special ocean place, we are more likely to take action to protect it. Next slide, please. That concludes my presentation, and I thank you very much.
Great, thanks so much, Ben. Clearly, Stellwagen Bank is a special place, and it's really good to see how these various techniques that you're utilizing is actually making a difference there. And it's really interesting to see some of those, non-regulatory techniques that they're using and how that makes a difference. I think highlighting that'll, shows how we can do that not only in just sanctuaries, but other conservation-minded ways to address things. So thanks for all that you just showed us there. I'll remind everyone that we can place some questions in the chat for Ben, and we'll come back to a Q&A session later after our next speaker. So our next speaker up is Karl Vilacoba. Karl is the Communications Director for Monmouth University Urban Coast Institute and serves as a project manager for Marco's Mid-Atlantic Ocean Data Portal. If you haven't met Karl yet, I feel like he needs no introduction. He's been so critical to all the work we do here. So Karl, here.
Thanks for that, Kevin. I trust you can see my screen and hear me okay. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. As Kevin said at the top of the call, the reason I'm here presenting this today is because NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries is in the early stages of the process to designate a new sanctuary at the Hudson Canyon. I don't come here today with any inside track on what's going to happen next, or any path that I'm advocating forward for any of this. Really, I'm just here to walk you through how the portal can be used to help get acquainted with this area through its maps and data, so that as this process plays out, we move forward and there is further public comment periods and so forth, that you'll be able to use the portal to help follow it, understand it, and also to make informed comments on the process and have your voice heard. For those who don't know much about the Hudson Canyon at this point, a quick tale of the tape. Begins about 100 miles off the New York, New Jersey coast and extends out to about 350. At points, it's about 2.5 miles deep and 7.5 miles wide, with a lot of diverse structure and steep slopes and substrate, which make it possible for all these cool marine life that you see in the right-hand column in these NOAA photos to live there and thrive. The nomination for sanctuary status came from Wildlife Conservation Society in 2016, and I saw Noah Chesney was on this call. So hello, and good to see you. So there's some WCS representation here. 2022, last year, World Ocean Day, actually, NOAA began the designation process for it. And I'll quickly flag that today is the application due date for Sanctuary Advisory Council nomination. So if anyone was thinking about trying to become a part of that, wrap up your work and get that in. I think most people here are probably at least somewhat familiar with the portal, hopefully have used it, but just a quick primer for those who aren't. This is a free, publicly accessible website at portal.midatlanticocean.org, containing 6,000 plus map layers organized around 13 categories, or themes as we call them. It has a lot of tools that we're building out for users to share their maps and collaborate around projects and groups if you want to start one. It has a lot of instructional and educational resources, including a portal blog that keeps you up to date on the latest data and tool enhancements, an Ocean Stories, which is kind of a digital magazine story map feature that we have, a calendar page for upcoming ocean planning activities, and we host webinars fairly frequently with how-to sessions on using the portal. The portal team currently is Monmouth University, where I sit, Rutgers University, Duke, New York State Department of State, and our developer EcoTrust out of Portland, Oregon, working under the guidance of the Mid-Atlantic Regional Council on the Ocean, or MARCO. One of the things I love to do, because so much of the portal work is obviously being in an office, emailing, Zooms, all of that stuff to put it together. It's a GIS site. Is getting out to the people, taking the portal to the people, as you can say, and really getting them to see what's on there and use it to get a look at what's going on at sea. And I had a really great opportunity to do this recently at the Submerged Marine Science Festival at Hudson River Park. And one thing that I do when I put up a portal kiosk like this usually is kind of think where I am, what map could I put on screen to use as a starter, a conversation starter to get people's attention as they're walking by. And that day, sitting right there on the Hudson River, I put up the canyon, which made a lot of sense. And as kids and their parents were coming up, I was able to say, hey, do you know that there's an underwater Grand Canyon about 100 miles off the coast of New York, and that this river right behind us ran all the way out there and carved that out? And people really, I must say, did not know, were very surprised to hear that. And so I hope that wherever this nomination process goes, that is one thing that comes of it, that the people get more aware of the canyon and just what an amazing place it is. And I'll say that for the last 6 years or so, I've been working with the WCS. They do a lot of professional development sessions for teachers, a lot of times focused on the Hudson Canyon, and there'll be a week long of activities. I'll come in one afternoon and give them a portal training. And it's through that process that I've really gotten more acquainted with the canyon and some of the maps that I'm about to show you here, which are kind of a highlight reel of what I've learned about it through that process. So with that said, I'm going to jump over to the portal. Anyone who wants to follow along, again, portal.midatlanticocean.org. And if you click on the map feature, that will take you to Marine Planner, our mapping application. And on the left, you see the 13 themes that I mentioned. And I always think a great place to start to learn about the canyons generally, but certainly the Hudson Canyon, is the seafloor habitat theme. And you can click right here on the submarine canyons layer, which gives you a look at all of the major canyons out there, and you can click on any of them for a pop-up that identifies which one you're looking at. Now, I'll just flag that this area here that we have for the canyon does not represent whatever NOAA will proceed with. I mean, it may be the same, it may be bigger, it may be smaller. In this particular case, we just took the same shape for the canyon that is used in the Frank Lautenberg coral conservation areas. And we did that for some of the other major canyons. And then for others that weren't included in that, we literally just drew shapes kind of around the main areas of the canyons just to highlight them. But to get a better look at any of them and the Hudson Canyon, our bathymetry collection, if you could start with regional. All of the maps in there are varying resolution. Some of them are just hitting certain areas where expeditions have been done. This one right here, the regional bathymetry, gives you that kind of lower resolution, just general look at the depths of the ocean in various spots. And you can see how there is this path, this depression here from where the Hudson River used to run out to the Hudson Canyon. And actually, a lot of people kind of call that all the Hudson Canyon. I've been on fishing trips and passed over it, maybe around here where I'm pointing to, and the captain would say, we're passing over the Hudson Canyon. But I think for the most part, what we're talking about is this area right here. And I'll go to the active tab, get rid of the canyon drawings, and crank up the visibility on this NCEI multi-beam archive layer, which I just love for the aesthetic beauty of it, really. We pull this one in from the NOAA and BOEM Marine Cadastre site, and it gives you a really great look at all of the undulations down there, and the kind of the peaks and the rocky valleys and all of that. And it follows all the way down. And you really get a good look from that layer at pretty much all of the canyons and everything from the shelf break on out. Moving along, marine life, with all of that structure in there, it's not a surprise that corals thrive in that area. So let me mute that. Maybe a little bit hard for you guys to see with Zoom if it's a shrunken screen, but all of these points in there show areas where corals and sponges have been observed. And you can click on any of them for a pop-up that tells you this one in particular was found in 2007. It's a stony coral. Here's another one from 2007. This blue one over here is delaying me. Good luck. A sea pen, here's one from 2004. So, just zooming out, you can see what an important habitat that is. And I'll also put up the highly migratory species map right here, which really shows a lot of activity around the Hudson Canyon. So this map layer is really talking about sharks, swordfish, tuna. You can click on it for a list of how many are generally known to roam those waters. In this particular spot, it says 23, and you can look up the list and it'll give you a yes or no from this big long list. So whale sharks, no, but you can find mako, dusky sharks, blue sharks, marlin, etc. I'll say that when I do educational outreach, especially kids love that layer, knowing that, oh my gosh, sharks actually live off my waters. So anyway, with all of those fish there, obviously the commercial fishing industry thrives out there. Looking at our VMS, our vessel monitoring system data, for all vessels carrying VMS transponders for 2015 through 19, it's electronically tracked. you can almost see how it carves out it delineates the Hudson Canyon out there, traces it. And if you go to under that same drop down squid, it gets very clear. I mean, that's almost like a bathymetry map of itself, with just how strong that relationship is all around the peaks surrounding that area. And, you know, if I were to put on that multi-beam archive layer again, see how well they really line up. I'll also show in our vessel trip report collection, our communities at sea. A lot of activity out there. Looking at bottom trawl, and this is 2011 through 15. You see a pretty clear trail all along that depression leading out to the canyon. And then that spot right there, it's like the Jupiter or the Great Red Spot, you know, click on that, you can get a pop-up of all of the communities that have relied on that area through this time period of 5 years. And you see Cape May fish is there, Virginia, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and so forth. You can do that with all of these different maps here and get a real good sense of that. And one last one I'll show. In a lot of NOAA's communications about the canyon, it mentions how there's a lot of historic shipwrecks in that area. And if you go to wrecks and obstructions, really one of my favorite maps on the portal, you can just kind of get lost in this. Zooming in, I'll try to turn that up so it's a bit more visible for you. And these are pretty small points, but if you click on any of them, it will once again give you a pop-up telling you a little about what's in that area. I'll go back to here so we can see the canyon itself a bit better. And out there, you see a lot of, in this case, a cargo ship that was sunk during World War I. Click on this one, you see quite a bit of that kind of thing. A schooner sunk in 1914, again, another casualty in World War I. But if you look at the canyon mouth, if it's like a pointer finger pointing straight out on this one, Texas Tower 4, which I find to be one of the most fascinating wrecks out there, just a couple of miles from the mouth of the canyon. And I'll show you a picture of it. Believe it or not, for those who don't know the story, this structure actually sat out near the Hudson Canyon for about 3 years in the late 50s and early 60s. It was a radar station, kind of an early warning system in case the Soviets were attacking the US. About 70 people had to pretty much live on there at any given time. And they called it Old Shaky because it was apparently a miserable place to be with all of the sway factor out there. And it was really poorly designed, unfortunately. It got even worse in about late 1960. It got hit by a hurricane, which damaged it and made it almost unbearable. And the officers aboard really wanted to get off and let it go and didn't feel it was safe. But they were commanded to stay, even when in January of 1961, I believe, so 62 years ago this month, another big nor'easter was coming. It hit it very hard, and unfortunately, it sunk it. And 28 people lost their lives aboard it. It went down very quickly. And that wreck is still out there. and is now kind of a attraction of sorts. If you go to our recreation theme and look at underwater activities, and this is one that was created in partnership with the Surf Rider Foundation. We asked where people like to do all kinds of underwater activities and surfing and beach going and all that. If you click on that point though, you can see that people reported that they went scuba diving there from charters. They went scuba diving on their own private boats. Scrolling down, the New Jersey DEP prime fishing grounds has that area circled as one of its prime areas. And scrolling down through that pop-up, you can see the captains who provided that information said that it's a good place for fishing for tuna, sharks, billfish, hake, some others. And scrolling right on up back into the fishing theme on our recreational fishing party and charter boat data, you also see quite a bit of activity around that vicinity. And of course, around the canyon itself. And you can click on that and see Barnegat, Brielle, Point Pleasant, go to that area. So that tends to be kind of a rite of passage in the parts where I live come early fall, or there's quite a few trips that go out there. So with that said, I am going to end my talk and open it up to conversation. And thanks everybody for your time.
Great, Carl. Thanks so much. Always a pleasure checking out the data portal. It's definitely one of the great things that we have out there that folks can check out all this information. It's really highlights, all the important information that we have out there and ways to access it, both across the federal governments and the states, and how that can be utilized, for various different purposes, from all the way from wind energy planning to these conservation measures that we're trying to achieve here. So again, I'll ask folks to, if you want to have any questions, please enter them in the chat. We have a couple in there right now, so I'll turn it back first to Ben. So there was a question in there about the number of years of records for baleen whales and determining those high use areas, if you know offhand.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So it's about 25 years of data that was used to create those baleen whale density areas. And that data was collated between two organizations, the Whale Center of New England and the Center for Coastal Studies, that collect opportunistic naturalist sightings of whales. And so we combine their databases and actually paid them for the data and corrected it for effort in order to create those density maps. So yeah, considerable effort and data went into that. I think it's probably one of the few places in the world that has, or it is actually the only place in the world with such a rich data set on baleen whale sightings.
That's great. It's really interesting to see how the science that happens in the sanctuary areas really helps inform management and areas outside of those locations too. So that's really helpful. There was another question there about just talking a little bit more about the incentive mechanisms that are used in protecting your resources there in Stellwagen Bank. If you can elaborate some on that.
I can. It would be helpful if Judy could bring up slide 21 in order to answer that question. So this is in the corporate responsibility program I mentioned. We Yeah, there you go. We develop report cards for each vessel that transits through two seasonal management areas, the Cape Cod Bay SMA and the Off Race Point SMA, which you see there in the map outlined in black. And Mike Thompson, our GIS guru, uses the AIS data sent out by all of those ships to analyze their performance or speed through these zones, which when they're in effect, vessels over 65 feet have to go 10 knots or slower. And so the report card will show how much distance they went at different speed thresholds. I believe it's 10 knots and less, 10 to 11 knots and greater than 11 knots. Not sure I have those thresholds correct, but that's about what we use. And we show them what their performance was and how much time it would take to for them to be in compliance. To illustrate that, with a slight change in behavior, they can achieve better compliance. So these report cards have been sent out to hundreds and hundreds of companies since 2012, and the company owners and the masters of the ships take this very seriously, and they post them, on the bridge, and they post them in the lunchroom to show that either they've been compliant or they haven't received a certificate this year. And some of them contact us and say, and at times apologize for not getting the certificate, and the owners say, I'll be talking to my captain about this. So it's very effective. And as I stated, compliance with these two SMAs are the best of all of them on the East Coast. These slow speed zones don't exist yet on the West Coast, but I think they are planned. So that's the answer, I hope.
Thank you, Ben. That's really interesting. I think that's, it shows a lot of utility across other parts, as there's speed zone restrictions and things that move seasonally and things like that. I would also be interested too, if I know you said 65 feet, is there a possibility of looking at smaller vessels, or is the 65-foot really the AIS issue in terms of the size of the vessels requiring transponders? I know as vessels get smaller than that, they're not always required to have those things. So I don't know if that's if there's looking at ways of increasing that program.
Yeah, I believe NOAA has a proposal out there out for public review right now to lower the size threshold to include more vessels and require them to go 10 knots, because what we find is that the smaller vessels are also hitting whales and causing considerable injury and in some cases death, and that it's not just vessels over 65 feet that increase the risk. And 10 knots was determined as the speed that above which lethality is more likely, and below which injury non-lethal injury might result. So that's why the 10 knot threshold was selected.
Great, thank you. We do have one follow-up on the whale density issue in terms of, will there be more consideration as it changes, as climate change results and kind of the shifts of those species? Is that like an ongoing management part of the Stellwagen Bank? Will you be looking at the data as that changes and modifying those lanes?
Modifying the lanes to accommodate climate change? Changes?
Yeah, so as
Okay.
there's shifting uses there and shifting species too, if you can see that in the data.
Yeah, we will be able to see that in the data. We'll continue to track where we see humpback whales, other baleen whales, and particularly right whales. They're monitored very closely because they're so critically endangered. As a result of climate change, in fact, the right whales stopped using the Bay of Fundy as a foraging ground and bypassed the Bay of Fundy and went up to the Gulf of St. Lawrence starting about 2017. Most undoubtedly due to climate change and its effects on the Calanus copepod that the right whale relies on not being plentiful in the Bay of Fundy. So they had to go off and find a new foraging ground. So changing patterns of distribution is happening, and we will monitor those and recommend changes accordingly to the shipping lanes. Either the main traffic separation scheme coming into and out of Boston, or these other two fairways that the Coast Guard has just preliminarily approved, going north-south and going up to Canada.
Great, thank you. So I know we're running short on time. If folks can stick around, we have a few more questions. It'd be great to go through them because I think one of these is pretty important here too. And Carl, I know I want to get back to you, but I know we have Ben for a limited amount of time, so I'm gonna ask him one more in there that actually, if you could speak to the role of the Sanctuary Advisory Councils and how that has played to help inform those conservation outcomes for the Stellwagen Bank Sanctuary.
Yeah, we have a great Sanctuary Advisory Council. I think one of the larger ones, maybe the largest one in the sanctuary system. I believe there are 17 voting members and about 6 ex officio state and federal members, non-voting. So it's pretty much all of the stakeholders, users and non-users are represented on our advisory council. A great group of people, very, very willing to engage and provide advice. Most recently on helping us develop the action plans for the revised management plan. And they really, rolled up their sleeves and helped draft these action plans and associated strategies. And as I mentioned, just created a new subcommittee on wind development that will advise us on possible cable corridors through the sanctuary and whether a buffer area is needed. So yeah, I mean, the SAC is instrumental in helping us manage and protect the sanctuary resources, and very willing to help whenever we need it.
That's great. This sounds like it's a really critical portion of any sanctuary management and things like that. So it's a really critical role. I know Carl mentioned it for the Hudson Canyon earlier about in terms of, I think today's the deadline for people to apply for that pre-designation SAC. So if you're interested in that, make sure you get on that. Carl, first one's a pretty easy one. So I think I'm pretty sure we have the answer to that. There was a question about explosive ordinances. I think there's some stuff on the portal there. So
Yes, so we have in our security theme 2 layers, unexploded ordnance areas and unexploded ordnance locations. The first shows kind of the areas that were designated for depositing those munitions. And the second really shows where there have just been individual pieces found here and there. So they're both in there. I'll note that the Marine Cadastre, who I mentioned earlier, they're just a great provider of the national level data that we have in the portal, is working on an kind of an updated version of this that's going to change its name to munitions and explosives. There's been a lot of new stuff found in recent years, so it's going to capture all of that, and we'll be adding that to the portal this year.
Great, thank you. Yeah, keeping track of all the portal stuff, always go to the portal website. There's always tells you what new data is out there. Lots of our How Tuesday opportunities to learn about different functionality too. So always check that out. Another one for you, Carl, kind of relates to the Hudson Canyon here a little bit. Do you anticipate seeing new data layers added to the portal that are helpful as this process moves forward?
Yeah, so it's almost tough to answer that question because as I showed there, almost everything on the portal seems to kind of point to the canyon in this area. But a few things that really stand out. Number one, our marine mammal data this year, the resolution of it is going to be doubled. And you may have seen, we did that with the right whale maps last year. And so we're going to be following the same path and making all of our marine mammal maps look like that. I think that will be very important. I'll also mention that as this process goes forward and if there is a designated area that NOAA releases and wants public comment on, we're definitely going to prioritize having anything like that on the portal so that people can learn about it as quickly as possible.
Great, thank you. And if we can have another minute, maybe Ben, we can ask another. There's a lot of follow up on some of the shifting species stuff. So it was been thinking about delineating these boundaries for sanctuaries. How can we accommodate those things that might be shifting? So if areas turn out to be no longer high use, would things shift in the opposite direction? So if like the whales are moving out of a different area as climate change happens, those species are foraging in different locations. How would we accommodate that kind of thing too? So
yeah, that's a good question and a tricky one, just because you can't be changing the boundaries constantly, which would be administratively difficult and very confusing to the public. But certainly we have to consider the effects of climate change on the distribution of species. And we have to keep in mind is that the sanctuary isn't just meant to protect whales, but other species as well. So we have to look at the whole suite of species and how they're changing, and where it makes sense to provide the most protection. And if the current sanctuary boundaries aren't providing the most protection, then we do need to consider shifting them or changing them to accommodate the shift in distribution. But it probably wouldn't be just for whales, but other species as well. And it's possible that if whales shift their distribution, then other species might as well, depending on the overlap in the food sources that they eat. But anyway, there's there's a lot to consider in a shift of sanctuary boundaries, and a lot of trade-offs to be made.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, clearly you have to really think about your boundaries for what's happening now and what might be changing in the future, and how you want to incorporate those things. So I think it's been great highlighting how that process has already happened in Stellwagen, and how information really feeds into that. And I think as we continue to further develop all the data that we have for our portals and other information, that helps us guide our conservation missions. So with that, I don't think we have any more questions, and I want to thank you guys all for sticking around here. And Ben and Karl, I want to thank you guys for joining and providing this great overview of both of the Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary. I think it's really critical for folks to understand how those things actually are managed, and what goes into it. And Karl, as always, thank you so much for the information that we go through on the portal, and how that can help everyone involved. So with that, thank everyone for joining us. Again, if you are interested in joining the our ocean conservation work group, please send us an email. Laura had put in our email addresses in the chat, so feel free to reach out, and we'll talk to you all soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.